Hello, welcome back to our channel. Thank you for your love and support. This past week, Madison has been struggling to win his lawsuit. Chelsea is also trying her best to help, enlisting the help of Naomi and Bill. However, it seems Madison's situation has affected the handbag brand she and Kat are working on, which is about to go public. Will everything go smoothly? Will Chelsea and Madison's love overcome this challenge? Let's find out. When Chelsea finally delivered the fatal blow, there was absolutely no softening of the edges, no trembling in her steady voice, and not a single trace of the tender, affectionate lover she had been just days prior. She executed the breakup with the clinical, terrifying precision of a corporate merger dissolution, outlining her reasons with a chilling detachment that stripped the intimate moment of any lingering humanity or grace. Chelsea made it agonizingly, brutally clear that the handbag brand, the magnificent empire she and Kat had bled, sweat, and cried for, took absolute precedence over their romance, and that Madison's complicated legal entanglements were a massive liability she was simply no longer willing to underwrite or endure. The delivery was utterly devoid of empathy, a highly calculated maneuver specifically designed to sever the emotional tie quickly and cleanly, leaving absolutely no room for negotiation, debate, or desperate emotional appeal. Chelsea's demeanor was an impenetrable fortress of ice, her eyes devoid of the familiar warmth that had once captivated Madison, replaced entirely by the hardened and blinking gaze of a ruthless businesswoman protecting her valuable assets at all conceivable costs. The sheer impact of Chelsea's meticulously chosen words struck Madison with the devastating force of a physical assault, instantly paralyzing her cognitive functions and plunging her into a state of profound, suffocating shock. For a prolonged, agonizing moment that felt like an eternity, the universe seemed to violently tilt on its axis, the fundamental laws of her reality unraveling as she struggled desperately to comprehend the sheer magnitude of the betrayal unfolding before her. It was entirely inconceivable that the woman who had shared her bed, her deepest secrets, and her grandest dreams was now casually discarding her like yesterday's news merely to salvage a fragile reputation and a corporate balance sheet. The cognitive dissonance echoing in her mind was deafening. Madison's brain violently rejected the incoming information, desperately searching for a hidden punchline, a terrible misunderstanding, or any remote sign that this was a cruel, elaborate test of her devotion. But as the heavy seconds ticked by and Chelsea's stoic, unyielding expression remained entirely unchanged, the horrifying truth began to sink its venomous fangs deep into Madison's psyche, initiating a catastrophic and irreversible emotional collapse. As the initial, numbing paralysis gradually wore off, it was rapidly and violently replaced by a surging, volcanic eruption of pure, unadulterated anger that threatened to consume the entire room. The sickening realization that she had been callously sacrificed for the sake of a superficial fashion label ignited a furious, uncontrollable inferno within Madison, instantly burning away the lingering remnants of her shattered, foolish love. She no longer saw Chelsea as a tragic victim of unfortunate circumstance, but rather as a parasitic, calculating opportunist. A woman who had merely worn the convincing mask of a devoted partner while constantly, secretly calculating the return on her emotional investment. In Madison's newly enlightened, deeply cynical perspective, every loving gesture, every supportive whisper from Chelsea's past was suddenly tainted with suspicion, recontextualized as a manipulative tactic designed solely to keep Madison compliant until she was no longer useful to the grand design. The betrayal was not just a simple rejection of their shared future, it was a retroactive, devastating invalidation of their entire history together, leaving Madison with the sickening, inescapable conviction that she had been nothing more than a convenient pawn in Chelsea's grand, narcissistic game of self-aggrandizement and corporate climbing. In a pivotal moment that would forever alter the trajectory of both their intertwined lives, Madison did not break down and surrender to the crushing weight of her heartbreak. There were absolutely no hysterical sobs echoing through the apartment, no desperate and dignified pleas for reconsideration, and not a single Solitary tears shed to validate Chelsae's inflated ego or somehow ease her lingering guilt. Instead, a terrifying, highly unnatural stillness washed completely over Madison, a physical manifestation of her shattered heart rapidly hardening into an impenetrable, jagged block of ice. The soft vulnerability that had defined her gentle presence in this relationship vanished into thin air, instantly replaced by a posture of lethal, coiled tension that radiated absolute danger. Her eyes, once soft, expressive, and full of adoration, narrowed into twin daggers of pure, unyielding malice. Locking onto Chelsae with a gaze so intensely cold and unforgiving it seemed to physically drop the temperature of the spacious room. This profound absence of sorrow was infinitely more alarming and dangerous than any explosive emotional outburst could have ever been. It signaled the permanent, unceremonious death of the woman Chelsae had deeply loved and the instantaneous, terrifying birth of a formidable, merciless adversary. Beneath that chilling, statuesque exterior, Madison's brilliant mind was undergoing a rapid, terrifying evolution, completely reorganizing her entire moral compass around a singular, all-consuming purpose, absolute, undeniable destruction. The profound love she had harbored so deeply for Chelsae did not simply evaporate into the ether. It violently inverted, transforming into a dark, toxic, and highly combustible energy that fueled a newfound, terrifying clarity of purpose. If Chelsae truly valued her soaring career, her pristine public reputation, and her precious, coveted handbag brand above the sacred sanctity of their devotion, then Madison would make it her absolute life's mission to ensure that those very things were systematically reduced to smoldering ashes. The psychological pivot was absolute and irreversible. The gentlewoman who had actively sought comfort, partnership, and peace was dead, replaced by a relentless, calculating architect of ruin who would stop at absolutely nothing to inflict a level of pain equal to, if not greater than, the profound betrayal she had just endured. This was no longer a simple matter of a broken heart seeking closure. It was about cosmic, undeniable retribution, a deeply personal, scorched earth crusade to violently balance the scales through total, uncompromising annihilation. Without uttering a single, solitary word of her dark intentions, Madison made a silent, unbreakable vow to herself, a blood oath sworn in the deepest, darkest, and most unforgiving corridors of her mind. She would specifically target the very foundation of Chelsae and Cott's beloved empire, ruthlessly exploiting every hidden vulnerability, every minor flaw, and every obscure legal loophole she could possibly find to dismantle the brand piece by agonizing peace. She vividly imagined the catastrophic collapse of their intricate supply chains, the panicked fleeing of their high-profile, wealthy investors, and the spectacular public humiliation that would inevitably follow as their meticulously crafted, flawless reputation was violently dragged through the unforgiving mud of the press. Madison's formidable legal acumen, previously a massive source of stress and exhaustion for her, was now a lethal, highly sharpened weapon she would wield with surgical, devastating precision against the very women who had deemed her disposable liability. She would happily become the ultimate, undetectable poison in the deep well of their success, a relentless, punishing phantom haunting their every business endeavor until the once revered name of their brand was entirely synonymous with spectacular, unavoidable failure. The established parameters of the ongoing legal battle, which had previously been a standard, albeit highly stressful, corporate dispute, were instantly and irrevocably mutated by this profound, deeply personal betrayal. It was no longer a simple matter of mitigating financial damages, protecting assets, or reaching a quiet, mutually beneficial out-of-court settlement. It was now a vicious, scorched earth campaign where massive collateral damage was not just considered acceptable, but actively and gleefully desired. Madison was fully prepared to leverage every single ounce of her considerable influence, every dirty, underhanded trick in the book, and every ounce of her formidable intellect to dramatically escalate the conflict to unprecedented, terrifying heights. She would deliberately draw out the complex litigation, slowly and agonizingly bleeding Chelsea and Cott's financial reserves entirely dry, effectively turning the sterile courtroom into a grand theater of psychological torture and public execution. The lawsuit would become a relentless, heavy siege engine, constantly battering against the fragile gates of Chelsea's precious company until the defensive walls completely crumbled and the glorious empire was left in absolute, undeniable, and highly publicized ruins. As Chelsea stood her ground by the window, desperately maintaining her carefully constructed facade of icy, professional detachment, a subtle, creeping unease began to slowly slither down her spine. A primal, unavoidable instinct warning her of the catastrophic, monumental error she had just made. She had fully expected hot tears, loud anger, perhaps a prolonged, exhausting argument that she could logically and systematically dismantle to justify her cruel, pragmatic decision. What she had absolutely not anticipated was the terrifying, almost sociopathic calm radiating so intensely from the woman she had just so casually discarded. Looking deeply into Madison's unblinking eyes, Chelsea saw the horrifying reflection of a relentless monster she had personally and deliberately created, a chilling realization that sent a cold, paralyzing shockwave straight through her nervous system. The pragmatic, calculated business decision that was supposed to brilliantly save her brand had inadvertently unleashed a devastating, uncontrollable force of nature. A highly motivated enemy who intimately knew all her deepest secrets, her hidden weaknesses, and the exact, precise coordinates of her most valuable and vulnerable assets. The hollow victory of temporarily saving her company suddenly felt entirely meaningless, completely overshadowed by the looming, suffocating dread of the brutal retribution she had just foolishly invited into her life. The impending, catastrophic collision between these two incredibly formidable women threatened to send massive, destructive shockwaves far beyond the soundproof walls of the luxury apartment, promising to completely destabilize the entire high-stakes, glamorous fashion landscape of Genoa City. The cutthroat industry, always ravenously hungry for fresh scandal and corporate bloodshed, would very soon become the grand, public arena for their deeply personal, highly destructive war. Long-standing alliances would be severely tested, bitter rivalries would be ruthlessly exploited, and countless innocent bystanders would inevitably be caught in the brutal crossfire as Madison's dark vendetta rippled outward, touching absolutely anyone associated with Chelsea and Cott's targeted brand. The glamorous, shimmering facades of the elite fashion world would be violently stripped away, revealing the ugly, merciless reality of a conflict driven not by mere profit margins or market share, but by pure, unadulterated, and highly toxic vengeance. Genoa City had certainly witnessed its fair share of corporate espionage and bitter, petty rivalries over the decades. But the sheer emotional velocity and deeply personal nature of this impending war promised a level of total destruction that the city's wealthy elite were entirely and hopelessly unprepared to handle. The heavy, suffocating silence in the apartment stretched to its absolute, agonizing breaking point, the stale air practically vibrating with the unspoken, terrifying promises of the emotional and financial violence yet to come. Every single agonizing second that slowly passed solidified the massive, unbridgeable chasm between them, permanently transforming the once shared, loving space into a cold, desolate graveyard of their past affections and shattered dreams. Madison did not rush frantically to the door in a tearful panic. Instead, she moved with a deliberate, predatory, and highly calculated grace. Her every slow motion a powerful testament to her newfound, terrifying resolve. She calmly gathered her presence, leaving behind the weak, vulnerable ghost of the woman who had foolishly loved Chelsea, and walked out into the dark night, carrying with her a destructive, explosive power fueled entirely by absolute, unforgivable betrayal. The quiet, definitive closing of the heavy apartment door was not just the sad end of a romantic relationship. It was the loud, echoing starting gun of a brutal, unforgiving, and highly destructive war that would ultimately leave absolutely neither woman unscathed.